Welcome in to Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. Outkick the Show brought to you by Oddshark. Go to Oddshark for all of your gambling and informational related needs. Thank you for supporting Outkick. We are on a roll. Just added Tampa in the morning, St. Louis in the morning. Close to adding several other cities for the radio show. 250 AM FM stations nationwide. Great show this morning. If you haven't already downloaded that podcast, go get it. I will tell you several things today on the rundown. We are going to talk about Mike Vick telling Colin Kaepernick to get a haircut, you bum. My night at the WWE Raw, which was fantastic. Netflix crushes expectations, surging over 100 million subscribers, what it could mean for the future of media. And Saudi Arabia arrests a woman for having the absolute gall, the temerity, the unmitigated, total and complete indefensible behavior of wearing a miniskirt in public. All of that and more. We began with a small update. Delta Airlines has reached out to me. They have apologized for inconveniences. I will let you know what happens further through those conversations. That's an upset already, but hundreds of thousands of people have read that article up on Outkick, most of whom think that Delta overreacted. Okay, let's start with Mike Vick and Colin Kaepernick. Mike Vick and Colin Kaepernick, to me. Oh, and for those of you who want to know, I flew coach on Delta from Nashville to London, Paris, back to Nashville. Never made it back to Nashville. The flight, people are like, why don't you fly private? Because it's like a $500,000 cost to fly private to Europe on a plane. Even for first class, we threw Virgin Atlantic over, which was flawless, absolutely amazing. If you haven't flown Virgin Atlantic, it was an incredible experience flying over. But just flying my family of 5 coach class overseas to Europe in the summer, it was $9,000. So I believe first class would have been $30,000. So that's crazy how expensive these flights are right now to go to London and return through Paris. So that's the deal. I spent, almost 10 grand on those tickets going overseas, and that's just for coach class seats. So didn't get my full value there. We'll see what Delta ends up saying. If you didn't listen to the radio show this morning, I had my buddy Jason Whitlock on because it was an answer to a question from Jason Whitlock that spurred all of this controversy surrounding Michael Vick and his suggestion that Colin Kaepernick go get a haircut. And now, of course, everybody in the liberal sports media is in an uproar. How dare you tell a guy to get a haircut? How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? And maybe I'm crazy here, but I don't see it as being that controversial of advice. First of all, it's 100% honest. People always want to give advice that's not very helpful, right? And so when you can give direct advice, as somebody like Michael Vick, who went from signing a $100 million contract to not signing signing another $100 million contract, it's simple advice. If you are interviewing for a job and you want to get one, get a haircut and be as presentable as possible. Just like you would say, wear a suit if you are going to court, or even if you're going to church and the church is a decent one, or you're going to a wedding, the way you dress gives significance, right? And I'll be honest with you, I'm 38 years old. When I was a kid, I used to have hair all the way down to my shoulders. In fact, I think the picture on I Hate You, Clay Travis on my Twitter profile, you can go see it. When I was 18 years old, I had hair all the way to my shoulders. And if you have good hair like I do, why wouldn't you let it go all the way to the shoulders? Why would you cut it off? But my dad, I remember coming to me and saying, I think you need to get a haircut. And I kept long hair for several years in college, and then I eventually got a haircut. And what's funny is my dad also had long hair, and his dad told him to get a haircut. So in some way, I think hairstyle is frequently a sign of rebellion, petty as it may be. And we had a good caller on the show this morning, and he said something interesting. He said, isn't it interesting that people say don't judge a book by its cover, when the entire purpose of most fashion decisions is to be judged by your cover? It's a great way of putting it. There's an aphorism out there where you say, don't judge a book by its cover. Yet the entire fashion industry is predicated on the idea that you are going to be judged by your cover. Moreover, people are all making decisions. When you go out and decide to get all these tattoos on your sleeves, up and down your arm, and when you make a decision that you're going to go out and get a mohawk, or you're going to go out and get tattoo on your face like Mike Tyson did, or you're going to go out and get ripped because you lift all day long and you're taking steroids and HGH, you're making a decision that you recognize that appearance matters. Colin Kaepernick has an afro because he's trying to signify that he is one with the Black Panther movement, which made the afro synonymous with black resistance, with black power. Well, that's fine if you want to do that, but if you're unemployed, what you're basically doing is telling other unemployed young kids you're a sellout if you do something that makes it more likely that you're going to be employed. I'll give you a couple of examples. I talked about this some on the radio this morning. I've got a beard. I've had this beard since I was 23 years old. Nowadays, beards have become common again. But back in the day, they were not very common. When I interviewed for law firms, Vanderbilt Law School, our career counselor set me down and she said, have you thought about shaving your beard off for career counselor for interview week? When everybody comes to the law firms, all come to the university, the law school, you go down into the catacombs of Vanderbilt University, you go into these little windowless rooms, and you conduct interviews. They said, have you considered getting your beard shaved? I said, why? They said, because most lawyers don't have beards, and historically, people with beards are considered to be less trustworthy. And I said, man, that's really kind of fascinating. I hadn't spent much time thinking about it. At that time, I then went back into the political arena, and I did some research, and we talked about this on the show this morning, but it's really pretty incredible. If you decided you were going to run for president tomorrow, let's say you decide you're going to run for president tomorrow, one of the first things that a political consultant would say to you if you have facial hair is shave it off and don't come back with it ever again. Did you know that we have not had a major party political candidate nominated, not win, but nominated with facial hair since Thomas Dewey in 1948? All the way back in 1948 is the last time either a Democrat, Republican, major political party had a candidate with facial hair. He lost in the memorable Harry Truman, Dewey versus Truman, like holding up the newspaper. This is the last time that somebody had facial hair and ran for president as a member of a political party. Now, he lost. The last time we elected a guy with facial hair was Fat Taft, all the way back in 1909. Got caught in the bathtub, also had facial hair, he had a mustache. Before that, it was in the 1800s. It was in the 1800s, the last time that we elected a candidate president who had a beard. Is that because people are racist against beards? Is that because facial hair on the face makes people uncomfortable? No, it's because clean-shaven, short hair makes you as inoffensive as you can possibly be. And so if you're giving somebody who's unemployed advice, the best advice you can tell them is wear a suit, shave your face, get your hair cut short. That's true. It signifies that you want a job. And so the fact that Mike Vick said the first thing I would tell him to do is get a haircut, basically get rid of the afro. It's actually perfect advice because it would be, and especially with Colin Kaepernick, a significant step that would at least show this guy's entire body is not all wrapped up in this social justice warrior mindset that he seems to have embraced. So what happened? Everybody but Jason Whitlock, who came on my show, and me, that I have seen with a prominent voice in media so far, has ripped Mike Vick to the high heavens, saying, oh, how dare he? And what Jason Whitlock pointed out is all of the guys who are ripping Mike Vick for his opinion are doing so while wearing suits with short hair. In fact, Michael Vick was right. If you look at Disney's hair policy, Colin Kaepernick couldn't go on the air as a Disney employee with an afro and represent Disney. That's pretty fascinating, isn't it? I always say to you guys, every time somebody comes out and says, why isn't Colin Kaepernick have a job in the NFL? I want you to fire back and say, why isn't your employment, why aren't you at ESPN or CBS or Fox or NBC or Bleacher Report or wherever it is, why aren't you hiring Colin Kaepernick? If you think Colin Kaepernick deserves a job so badly, why aren't your bosses hiring him? Why isn't ESPN making the decision to go hire Colin Kaepernick? If he's such a knowledgeable quarterback, and if his statements on race and politics are so profound, hint, hint, they aren't. He's not very smart. But if all that was true, why wouldn't ESPN go hire Colin Kaepernick? I've got an answer for you, because it's bad for business. And so when Michael Vick came out and said, guys, what you need to do is cut your hair. First step, if I were giving advice to Colin Kaepernick, it was so brutally honest that I loved it. It was so outstanding that he just told you exactly what he would say to Colin Kaepernick if he sat across the table. Now, Kaepernick doesn't have to do it. He's just giving him advice. He's saying, if I were you and I was unemployed and I was trying to get employed, the first thing I would do is cut my hair. And that's, by the way, pretty good advice for anybody regardless of their race. If you have long hair, cut it short. If you have a beard, probably shave it off. Go out there, be as inoffensive as possible, show up for the interview on time in a suit, and do your best job to sell yourself and get a job. That's why David Stern was ahead of the mob here. David Stern, imagine if he tried to do this today. It would be an outrage on Twitter. David Stern recognized that the NBA had an image problem. And he thought the NBA would have less of an image problem if he had young, predominantly black athletes dress as if they were going into a business environment when they showed up for work. Now, I'm a guy who wears shorts and flip-flops and T-shirts every day. I said earlier on the show, I gave you an example. When I practiced law in the Caribbean, I used to show up every day in flip-flops. I had a suit on, or at least, a nice pants and shirt, my suit in the office, and I would keep my shoes, my dress shoes, my normal warrior shoes, at my office underneath my desk. And I would drive, oftentimes in my Jeep, down to the office, open air, like to have my feet free, let them breathe, in my flip-flops. And I would walk into the office. We'd park underneath. I would walk into the office, just barely walk down the hall in my flip-flops, and then I would switch into shoes, sit there at my desk and start work. One of the partners at the law firm saw me and complained, and I had to start wearing shoes. And her argument, which I can understand, was that if there were a client in the building and they saw the attorney who was representing them arrive that morning in flip-flops, it looked unprofessional. Now, I disagreed, but I was 25 years old, and I certainly could understand that argument. Moreover, here's an important fact. I was an employee. Now I'm not an employee. I get to set my own rules about dress. I get to do whatever I want all day long, provided I manage to make money, right? One of the great things is when you're a boss, you get to make the decisions about how you govern your life. When you're an employee, you don't. And that's why it's great to own your own business if you can do it. So I think the advice that Mike Vick gave to Colin Kaepernick that he publicly shared is 100% valid. I think it's great. And I think it is what should be applied here. Anybody disagree? I'll take your questions about what has turned into a controversial statement by Michael Vick. I'd encourage you to go download the Outkick podcast, and you can go ahead and find out what Jason Whitlock had to say on our show. Anybody? I don't even see any disagreement. I don't understand how this is controversial. I don't see how it's remotely connected to race. I said on my show this morning, I said, look, I've got young kids. You guys know that. When my kids were trying to get a good job, one of the first things that I would say is get your hair cut. Wear a tie, wear a suit, get your hair cut when you go in for an interview. Michael Vick cut his hair when he came back for a second time to try to get a job. I think it's good advice. He used to have cornrows. He got it done. Cut your hair is controversial. Lose weight is controversial. Be better at your job. And being better at your job is oftentimes taking it more significantly. Yeah, and I'll say this. I've criticized MSESPN a lot. One of the things that I think Fox is dropping the ball on, frankly, is we've got a lot of shows that just regurgitate the same talking points that ESPN has. Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. And I say we, even though I'm not a Fox employee anymore. Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. It's the left-wing gobbledygook. Every day. The new show that we're going to have on in the morning, it's going to be left-wing gobbledygook every morning. The people who are doing the best job at giving you diverse political opinions and sports opinions and opinions in general are the guys at Fox Sports Radio. Colin's show, you don't know what his opinion is going to be on a day-to-day basis. Jason Whitlock's very good. Doug Gottlieb, very good. I think if you start with us, Dan Patrick's very good. You start with Fox Sports Radio's lineup now. It's better than any TV network's lineup. You've got me from 6 to 9. You've got Dan Patrick from 9 to noon. You've got Colin Cowherd from 12 to 3. And you got Doug Gottlieb from 3 to 6. From 6 a.m. in the morning East Coast to 6 a.m. East Coast with Doug Gottlieb, we have the best lineup in the history of sports talk radio. That's 12 hours straight of really, really talented guys all giving you unvarnished, honest opinions that are different. Now, we're not always going to agree on every issue. I think that Speak for Yourself has been really good, but I think to the extent that we have, and I say we again because I used to be employed at Fox, but I think to the extent that FS1 has tried to do things differently than ESPN, instead what they've often done is just enable the same kind of people that ESPN would have hired. There's not a hill of beans bit of difference between what Skip and Shannon sound like on FS1 and what they would sound like on ESPN. I think that's a flaw in FS1's ability to distinguish themselves from ESPN. Having strong opinions, Jamie Horowitz was right about that. Having strong opinions that are the exact same strong opinions as what the people at ESPN have are, in my opinion, not useful. So that's just my opinion. All right. Couple of additional questions. Any other questions about Mike Vick and the haircut? Let's talk a little bit about my night at WWE. I had a spectacular night. I don't know how many of you watched the WWE. I had not been to a WWE, a wrestling event, since I was a kid, and I got to go here in Nashville. It was incredible. We were on the second row. The WWE people came, took us backstage. I got to meet, my kids got to meet the Big Show and get their picture taken. Greg Hardy of the Hardy Boys. It was just awesome. It was a really cool experience. We were on the second row. My kids are 9 and 6-year-old, and it was a fantastic experience for them. So we had an incredible time. Thanks to WWE for hooking us up. And I would encourage you guys, if you have young kids, take them to WWE. It was a great experiment. It's not Greg Hardy, whatever the Hardy guy is. Not the guy who played for the Dallas Cowboys, whatever the Hardy brother is, who's part of the tag team. I thought it was Greg Hardy, whatever. The white guy who's a part of the Hardy Boys the Hardy Boys team. I'm not sure, Jeff Hardy. All right, Jeff Hardy, whatever his name was. Okay, so with me, my wife, and the 2 kids, we had an incredible time. I did. We left a little bit early. I saw the guitar smash on video. Had to get out of there, get back to the house. My kids are about to fall asleep there, even though they were loving it, because they got back from Europe on Sunday, so they're still a little bit behind. They're getting up in the middle of the night now. A couple of other things. Did you guys see the earnings report from Netflix? They added over 5 million subscribers. They now have over 100 million subscribers, more subscribers out of the country than in the country. It's a Goliath. It's a Leviathan. It is an unbelievable success story. And here is what I think Netflix has learned that many other media companies have not. We are not in the era anymore of producing massive audiences by and large. Sports produces massive audiences when it's a huge game. NFL, college football, major sporting events. What produces massive audiences otherwise is what initially appears to be niche that explodes into the universe in a positive way. Let me give you an explanation. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones. Initially, Game of Thrones looked like it was going to be a Dungeons and Dragons filled fest that only appealed to people who were interested in Dungeons and Dragons type stories. Same thing was true of The Sopranos. The Sopranos is going to appeal to guys who like true crime, women who like to sit around and watch stories about the Italian mafia. And then the story was so well told that it transcended the audience that it initially had. Let me give you another couple of examples. Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad, initially tiny audience, but with the buildup of binge watching and everything else, it grows into something substantial. What I'm hitting at here is the days of being blandly inoffensive and appealing to a large audience are gone, right? What you need to do is find a niche that loves something, fulfill them, and then hope the niche expands and becomes something larger. For a long time, what shows like SportsCenter did was they went out and they tried to be all things to all people. And there's still a lot of media executives that do this. In fact, they look at me and they say, we can't have Clay Travis because he doesn't appeal to everybody. He's too aggressive. He's too opinionated. He's too outspoken. And what they're not recognizing is people who love me and people who hate me is a substantial audience that has moved beyond niche, right? And all you need to do now is find tribes of people who love things. The old school day of let's put on Family Ties and we're going to have 85 million people sit down and watch Claire Huxtable and Bill Cosby is gone. There are so many entertainment options now that you find a tribe, you find a niche, and you serve them, and that's a business. And eventually you put like 15 or 20 of those together and it becomes a big business. Television programming is still being done in a backwards fashion. They're worried about trying to be all things to all people. The people who are all things to all people are not liked in today's day and age, and they're not disliked. But unfortunately, that means that most people are indifferent to them. You have to produce love or hate, and you produce love or hate by serving a niche. Because that's when people come out and they say, man, I love Clay Travis, or I hate Clay Travis. Nobody's like, I don't really have that strong of an opinion about Clay Travis. I watch Clay Travis or I listen to Clay Travis and I don't really like him or dislike him. I don't really have an opinion. I'm just using me as an example. The same thing can be true of Colin Cowherd. Colin Cowherd has produced an incredible audience, but it's all about finding that niche and delivering it. And that, my friends, is what Netflix has done. They go out and they think, okay, we think 5 million people are going to like this show. And if you produce enough different shows to make everybody like them, then eventually some of them become popular and cross over. Stranger Things is a good example. Stranger Things Part 2 is coming out on Netflix in October. I can't wait. Stranger Things initially was, we're just going to appeal to real horror fans. And then it crossed over and became a tremendous success. But there are lots of other individual stories that have never blown up in a positive way that are all designed to do smaller audience. Substantial choices as opposed to trying to hit broad markets. The future is in defining smaller groups and giving them things that they love. Mad Men's a good example. Shows that are really smart that may only have 1 or 2 million of people who watch them, but that 1 or 2 million is really, really committed. That's the future. Did you see that in Saudi Arabia, one of America's best allies, they just arrested a girl for wearing a miniskirt? I bring this up because before I left on vacation, I was talking to you guys about the ridiculous decision of the state of California to ban travel to 8 different states. Tennessee, Texas, North Carolina, South Dakota, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Alabama, I believe. Maybe Mississippi too, if I forgot some of those states. And all those states are banned. There are 8 of them now banned. And California did it because there are things on the books there that they disagree with. And they said, this is inappropriate. We can't accept it. You know what they're doing? They're still allowing state-sponsored taxpayer travel to Saudi Arabia, where there are now women being arrested for appearing in public in miniskirts. It's one of the most ridiculous decisions I've ever seen. And it points to what I think has become a fundamentally broken aspect of American politics. People decide to make points about American political disagreement when those disagreements are not very substantial. Let me give you an example. In the state of Tennessee, the reason why California has banned state travel to California is actually really fascinating. It's because my wife's a counselor. We met in law school, but she ended up going to school to become a guidance counselor. And she went and she did something interesting. She went to study this law. And what Tennessee's law does is it says if you are a counselor and somebody comes to you and they say they're gay and they need help with being counseled about being a homosexual, if you don't agree with it, because of religious reasons, you believe that homosexuality is a sin, you are allowed to find someone as a counselor who is better able to advise that person. Now, this is not that radical of a position because there are many different ethical requirements in, for instance, the practice of law, whereby if you feel like you have a conflict with somebody, representing someone, you don't have to represent them, right? You can go find refer them to an attorney who might do a better job representing them than you can. That law is what California has banned travel for. Think about that for a minute. California has banned travel to the state of Tennessee for taxpayer-funded dollars because they disagree with the state of Tennessee saying that if you are a counselor and you believe that you have a religious conflict when it comes to advising somebody about being gay and how their life is being impacted by it, if you think you can't do a good enough job as a counselor for them, you are allowed to refer them to somebody you think is going to do a better job. And that is considered discrimination by California, and they have stopped people from traveling from California to the state of Tennessee on taxpayer-funded dollars. Is that unbelievable, or is that unbelievable? I am totally blown away by the absurdity of that. Yet California still allows taxpayer-funded travel to Saudi Arabia, where today they just arrested a girl for having the gall, the audacity, the temerity, the indefensible nature of wearing a skirt in public. If that doesn't boggle your mind to the high heavens, and this is what I have said for a long time about the way that we're responding to politics in America today. When the NBA banned the All-Star game in North Carolina, they still were playing games in China and in Mexico, 2 countries that have infinitely worse human rights records than the state of North Carolina. When Bono decided we're not playing U2 concerts in North Carolina. They still traveled overseas and played in totalitarian regimes. The standard that's being applied in United States daily interaction politically is not the same as the standard that's being applied internationally. And so that is when I think you need to hold politicians' feet to the fire and say, what you're trying to do here is score political points by dividing this nation and at the same time not doing anything to make the world a better place. So for all these people out there that are constantly marching and they're constantly upset about life in America, why don't they ever get involved in life in other countries? I'll tell you, because that's dangerous. A lot of people want to analogize modern day social media slacktivism with the civil rights movement or the suffragist movement or anything else that took place in America that helped to gain groups of people that didn't have rights. And the fundamental flaw there is those actions were dangerous. All right? If you were a civil rights activist in 1962 in Mississippi, you might die. If you march today, nobody does anything to you. You just get to post a selfie on Twitter or Facebook about how much of a social justice warrior you are. There ain't no Edmund Pettus bridges to be walking over. There isn't any actual danger. There's no Bull Connor with the fire hoses. The real danger in this world would be if young American kids who were idealistic decided they wanted to stand up for the billions of people in this world who do not have the same rights that they do. But that would require that you leave this country and you go actually risk something like the civil rights activists of the 1960s did in other countries where you don't have American civil rights protections, where you don't have bona fide First Amendment rights, and where you could be arrested and locked up and thrown in jail. And guess what happens? They don't do anything about those countries. The only place I bet you hear about this Saudi Arabian girl getting arrested for wearing a miniskirt is probably going to be right here on this show. And that is because I'm telling you right now, social justice warriors are, by and large, a bunch of pussies who don't actually risk anything to try to advance the causes that they believe are just. Final thought for you today. Did you see the story out of Minnesota about the Somali policeman who shot an Australian blonde woman and killed her unarmed? Did you see that story? It's almost nowhere in the media. There's no front page story in the New York Times. There's no CNN coverage unbelievably focused on it, talking about, oh my God, I can't believe that a black person killed a white person in this country. I am a defender of the police. If you want to know the truth, it is that police are imperfect. They have a very difficult job, and sometimes they commit heinous acts, just like everybody else in every other profession in life is imperfect. The difference is, if a police officer has a bad day, somebody dies. If a McDonald's worker has a bad day, somebody has to wait 45 minutes for French fries. All right? The stakes are different, fundamentally. And so it's interesting to me how the media covers these police shootings when they don't involve black people being the victims. The reason why so many black people believe that they are targeted by police is because the only stories that get covered by the media is stories where black people are killed by the police. If this Australian woman had been instead a young black person, and if the shooter, instead of being black, had been white, if you reverse the races in this story right now, it's the #1 story in America right now, right? If this woman is a young black woman, and if the shooter is a white male, it's the #1 story in America right now. It's everywhere. You reverse the races, this is the #1 story in America. As is, it's barely receiving any attention at all. And that is not because police are flawless. It's because the only way you can sell a story like this is if racism is the underlying story, if you're trying to scare black people into the idea that the police are out to get them. I love you guys. I appreciate all of you. Don't be a pussy. #DBAP. Go buy Outkick gear shirts. I'll be back live tomorrow morning, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, over 250 new stations. We have got now St. Louis, Tampa coming online, and we also have Sirius XM Channel 83. I'm Clay Travis. Love you guys. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me. We'll be back tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern, as we are every single day. Go to OddsShark for all your gambling and informational related needs. We'll have John Campbell from there on tomorrow, talking about Game of Thrones odds, who's the favorite to sit on the Iron Throne. And we'll have Alex Marvez, Jeff Schwartz, lots of fun. Go listen to the podcast from this morning's show. Jason Whitlock was great. I'm Clay Travis. You guys are the best. #DBAT.